Welcome to Games Growth with Upptic, a podcast about the discipline of scaling digital games. We speak with industry experts and investigate trends to highlight the strategies, technology, and tactical methodology you can use to profitably grow your game to massive global audiences. If you're interested in learning more, visit us at Upptic.com. My name is Xander Agosta, Director of Marketing at Upptic, and joining me today are my co-host,
Warren Woodward, co-founder of Upptic.
One of our colleagues at Upptic.
Hi, Eva Savitsky, and I'm Creative Director at Upptic.
And our guest.
Hi there, I'm Kate Lovejoy. I'm the U.S. Managing Director and Chief Performance Officer at Adikteev.
Awesome.
Welcome, Kate. So glad to have you on. Longtime industry friend and someone we have a ton of respect for. So really excited to have you join us today.
Oh, that's very kind. The feeling is mutual. I'm very excited to be here today and talking with you folks.
Awesome. So we have a pretty interesting topic. We'll be speaking about retargeting, its current place in the marketing technology stack, and then focusing a little bit on creative and how retargeting creative differs from user acquisition creative and how you throw that all into a pot to get a successfully growing game. But to kick it off, I wanted to highlight something that we released a few weeks ago. Going forward, Adikteev and Upptic are partnering to provide an exclusive retargeting offer whereby anyone who runs Adikteev retargeting through Upptic will get an additional 15% credit in addition to their normal retargeting budget. So basically that means you can do more profitable retargeting through Upptic than through anyone else when using Adikteev. So we highly encourage folks to check that out. And there'll be a link at the top of the show notes and on the blog correlated with this that you can, if you're interested in learning more. Cool. So with that out of the way, we're just going to go to Kate first. And Kate, can you just give us a little bit about your background, what Adikteev is and what you do there, and we'll jump into retargeting from there?
Yeah, sounds great. So Adikteev is a mobile growth engine. So we're focused on in-app retargeting with a particular expertise in gaming. So it's similar to you guys over at Upptic. We basically help mobile marketers to activate, upsell, and retain their existing user base. So not driving installs, but driving everything after. And so we really combine a sophisticated machine learning with world-class creatives built by our in-house team. And so a little bit about me, in addition to being that U.S. Managing Director, I've just taken on a new role at Adikteev that I'm pretty excited about. So building out our new performance division. So that consists of creative experts, so designers and developers, as well as a small group of consultative strategy experts who have deep experience in the industry and in retargeting. We've found over the years that I think one of our big differentiators on the market is our ability to deep dive into data with our clients and really use that to guide actions on the campaigns. And so this new team will be wholly focused on that, on maximizing performance. And so truthfully, it's really just the beginning of this new division, but I'm super excited about how it can serve our clients in the long term.
That sounds interesting. So it seems like with that new role, Kate, you get to be kind of focused, being in the client's corner, working with them on the strategy that's going to be optimal for them, with the thesis that ultimately, if it's successful for the client, it's going to contribute to long-term relationship with Adikteev as a customer of Adikteev. Is that kind of the thesis of this role in your team?
That's absolutely it. It's really maximizing the performance that we can get for our clients by adjusting the audiences, adjusting the creatives, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, when I first started dabbling in retargeting, working with companies like Adikteev, I found there was kind of like a big mental bridge to overcome, because it's almost like being good at UA equips you with just enough to where you might think you know what you're doing, but it's really a different beast. Like a lot of it rhymes, but it's not one-to-one that like a strategy from a creative or from a optimization standpoint that works for UA is a one-to-one strategy you can replicate for retargeting success. So excited to dig more into that with you today.
So let's just start all the way at the beginning. For those who are uninitiated, can we talk about what is retargeting and how does it work?
Sure. So like I mentioned, it's really about everything that happens after the install. We work with our partners to define an audience of valuable users, either based on rules of their in-app behavior or on predictions. We're taking that audience and we're serving a creative to them out on OpenRTB. So we're a demand side platform. So really our expertise is in, and our kind of special sauce is in getting that right ad to the right user at the right time, again, after the install. And then what we're looking to do is one of three things. So one, either activate a new installer, so getting them to make a first subscription or some important initial action, or we're trying to retain them. So helping our clients to keep their users in their app, in their ecosystem, coming back every day. And then lastly, what we're helping with is upselling those users. And I think that's where really we drive the most value for games, is in taking that payer base that you have and making sure they're making as many purchases as possible for as high of a revenue value as possible.
It makes a ton of sense. Okay, so we're going to do a deep dive on the creative side. One of the things I'm really focused on and interested in is doing a compare and contrast between user acquisition and retargeting. But first, I want to go through a little bit more of sort of high-level context for how retargeting works at a high level. So I think one of the first things you talked about sort of these three different use cases. I'm curious, can we talk about, from a user acquisition perspective, we care mostly about ROAS, right? That's how much we pay for an install versus how much revenue we get back. What are some of the core KPIs that folks look at in order to ensure that they're doing effective retargeting campaigns for the different segments that you just addressed?
Yeah, so I think there's two important things to keep in mind when we're talking about measurement for retargeting versus user acquisition. One is that the cohorting is different. So a retargeting campaign and a user acquisition campaign could both have a day 7 ROAS goal, but that actually means something very different in retargeting. So in user acquisition, it's very straightforward. Day 0 is the install, the point of install. With retargeting, we're not only caring about those initial days post-install. So day 0 cohorting is different. For retargeting, the day 0 could be the time of the click, could be the time of the impression, or it could be the time of the reattribution or re-engagement. So just something to be aware of, it's a little bit more variable when it comes to retargeting. The other differentiator, I would say, is incrementality, which is less considered in user acquisition, but super important for retargeting. And so with incrementality, basically, we're just trying to make sure that what we're doing is not cannibalizing organic activity and that it's having a true impact. And so the way that we measure that at Adikteev is with an intent to treat methodology. So we're taking your user base, we're basically dividing it into two. We have a control group who will not be allowed to see ads, and then a target group who is allowed to see ads. We look at those two groups, and then we compare the average revenue per user, the conversion rate, things like that, to be able to see the meaningful impact that retargeting is driving. Something I'm super proud of at Adikteev is that our methodology is 100% verifiable. So we will actually provide not only the logs, but also the formula we use to put users in target versus control. And you can be 100% sure of the results that we're driving. We're not taking any assumptions the way some other methodologies might.
Awesome. Cool. So I'm going to sort of put a pin in the high level of retargeting. We may come back to this at the end because I have a few other thoughts and questions. But I really want to jump in and talk about creative as a focus. And so let's start at the top and say, what are some key creative trends and techniques that you've seen effective for retargeting in 2023? And then Ava, I'd love for you to jump in if you have any thoughts about that and then talk about how we can compare and contrast that to what we're seeing on the user acquisition side.
Totally. I'm excited to hear about the trends on the UA side. I would say we're continuing to see really strong results coming from rich media. So in particular, there are some differences between rich media for retargeting versus user acquisition. So with user acquisition, especially for games, I think there's this idea that it's really important to replicate the game entirely, which can be hard to do, especially when there's, heavy graphics, like complex in-game mechanics that you want to do justice to. In user acquisition, that kind of direct replica is super important because it's the user's first exposure to the game. In retargeting, you know that the user has already played the game before. And so it's less about, okay, let me recreate this experience to make sure they get, the perfect replica, and more about, okay, let me give them a brand reminder. Let me generate some kind of fear of missing out to make sure that we get them back to the app. And those assets in retargeting, we can make them we can focus on making the units lighter versus trying to have super high fidelity. So one of the differences that I think is important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I would agree with retargeting. It's like about the gentle nudge, the reminder to keep everything top of mind and first in choice as an available option. And I think kind of like less is more. It's kind of like smarter rather than harder strategy with retargeting. So just a lot of gentle pushes and nudges to build brand familiarity, to build trust, and just kind of remind those key moments that are like fun in the game and to return. And as Kate mentioned, definitely kind of putting the FOMO spin on it to just encourage people to check back in, see what they're missing. It's a really good opportunity to promote new content, new levels, characters, and also offer in-game incentives or some kind of welcome back offer. I think that's one of the main differences we see. Statics are really good for if there's a specific offer of one little bit of information that you want them to get, a bite-sized piece super quick. And video is definitely a better option if you're showcasing new content in the game, kind of want to remind them of that nostalgia or highlight new material that would take a little bit of a deeper dive to get rather than just one image.
Yeah. Ava, I wonder if we want to talk about this from another perspective. So let's sort of flip it on its head. And so people who listen to older episodes of the podcast have heard you talk about what is hot in UA now. I'm not going to assume that everyone who's listening to this podcast has listened to all of our old ones. We make a lot of podcasts. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of the macro trends that we're seeing in UA right now? And then we can maybe flip it on its head. And Kate can talk about how that compares and contrasts what she's seeing on the retargeting side.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for sure, a lot of user-generated content, just kind of really raw, natural, organic content. We're seeing so much over-the-shoulder kind of videos of just people tapping a phone, playing the game. A lot of just kind of mismatched, kind of stop the scroll tactics are working really well. That kind of creates that like, what is going on vibe here to just stop the scroll. And I think you really just have like a few seconds to do that, like maybe 1 to 3 seconds. So we're seeing definitely less polished creatives overall in UA, certainly a lot of live action working really well, seeing a lot of really interesting things come out of AI with automated VO and getting really kind of interesting and creative with AI avatars and animated avatars. So there's a lot of really interesting things there that we're paying attention to and enjoying across our portfolio.
Yeah, and a couple of things I would add to that is I think we're seeing more time being resourced for channel-specific creatives. And maybe this is something, Kate, transitioning to you, I wonder, retargeting shows up in a lot of different places. So, you know, in UA, where we might see that we kind of make one style of bespoke creative that's more optimized to a channel like TikTok or, you know, Snapchat, because Adikteev and retargeting in general has to show up in a lot of different use cases. Do you find, I mean, how does what Ava described compare to what the tactics that you guys do on the creative side? Do you do things that are more kind of a little more, I don't want to say generic, but like one size fits all, can like show up in a number of different formats and use cases?
Yeah, so I mean, we are seeing similar overall macro trends, but you're exactly right. We tend to focus our creatives more on the moment in the user journey versus the context that it will be showing in. So for example, if the user has made it to level 60, we want to make sure we're showing them a creative that's relevant to a user who's made it to level 60, maybe in-game elements from later on, versus showing them something from a really easy early level. So for us, our creative team is really focused on working with our team to know, okay, what exactly is this audience that we're going after? And how can we make sure that we're getting the right messaging in front of them based on what a user at that moment will care about. The other thing I'll mention with retargeting at Adikteev that is maybe particular is that having all available formats is super important. So in user acquisition, you might, see the best performance on video. So you're going to start running only video maybe on a campaign. With retargeting, the most important thing is actually getting an ad in front of a particular user, wherever they may be. And so we want to make sure we have full coverage of MRAID video static to make sure that if we get a bid request for a user with a particular format attached, we can serve to that. For example, we see that a lot of payers happen to be in news and weather apps, which kind of makes sense because everybody has to check the news and weather every day. And often those apps only have static available. So super important that we have static to reach those users.
That's an super interesting hot tip right there. Reach your gamers on their weather app.
Yeah, exactly. It's unintuitive, but you got to find them where they're at.
I think that's a great point too about keeping the messaging consistent across retargeting. Like UA in general is a really great way to cast a wide net of a lot of creative concepts and get more experimental and wild, whereas retargeting, you kind of know what's going to work and lean in heavily into that and keep the messaging across all your platforms consistent and memorable.
For retargeting creative, do you find, one thing that we find comes up a lot with discussing with our clients who are thinking about getting into retargeting is, should they focus on promoting and creating content around a specific offering? Like if they have a big app update, a new character in their game, a promotion of some kind, how often is that a meaningful part of the strategy from the creative standpoint versus like just using sort of tried and true evergreen creative and more, as you said, about like when you serve that in the journey and the targeting around it?
Yeah, I would say the folks that have the best results with us have a two-pronged strategy. One with evergreen creative content to make sure you're not missing out on an opportunity to get an ad in front of a user. And so those would be the standard, based on level, et cetera, et cetera. But then also they're typically running supplemental campaigns around those special in-game promotions. And with those, we'll have a dedicated creative, a dedicated deep link, and they run for like a timed flight. And those perform particularly well, but they need that kind of evergreen campaign and creative running at the same time to keep the users active and purchasing. So most clients, not most clients actually, but I'll say the clients who see the best performance use a dual strategy there.
Got it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, it seems sort of self-evident that the stuff around the live ops is going to be outperform anything that's in evergreen content. So that's a interesting call out.
Precious, super great. You're getting you're giving the user a reason to come back. That's super obvious, and so that works well.
And often timely, right? Where it's like this is running for the weekend or whatever, something like that. So it makes a ton of sense. Warren, you talked a little bit a few moments ago, and you were saying that we have you on the user acquisition side, and I think you can probably speak to this. We're now increasingly focused on making channel specific or segment specific creative that is distinct on either a specific channel or a specific platform. I'm curious if you want to talk a little bit about that on the UA side, and then Kate talking about how that compares and contrasts on the retargeting side as well. We sort of touched on it, but I am curious to sort of dig into the UA side.
Yeah, the cool thing about like doing channel specific UA creative is you can think about what the exact user experience is going to be and how they're going to encounter that ad. I mean, what Ava was talking about with UGC style, like organic looking content in TikTok. I mean, you think about the experience, you're flipping through TikTok, and if something looks like real content, it's going to be more likely than you watch it rather than like click here gaming ad, right? And another good example of this that's pretty different is rewarded video. So these would be ad networks like Unity, IronSource, AppLovin, et cetera, where someone's playing a game and then they get a reward in the game in exchange for watching a video ad. So in this case, you have a captive audience because they're required to watch the whole, usually a 30-second max piece. So you have a full time format. You don't have to do like thumb stopping. You can actually tell a little longer story because you have their full attention for that period of time. It's not it's an opt-in experience rather than a disruptive experience. So I think that broad framing for UA of like, is this a disruptive ad where you're, interrupting something else that they're doing? And what is their experience at the moment that you interact with them? Or is this something where they're choosing to watch it? And what is the use case? So that can really inform what you design. Ava, is there anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I think it just depends on attention span. That's why at Upptic, we very often will encourage cutting different lengths of creatives, a 30-second length, 15-second length, and we're seeing a lot of traction with even 7-second or under creatives. So a lot of times a creative concept that we cut in one length will do better shorter or longer. I think it depends a lot by genre too, and how much information we're kind of packing in there for if it's like an explainer video or we're trying to get a lot of tips and tricks in there, if it's just kind of like highlighting cute features, gameplay, and some of the more just visual aspects of the game. So it depends on a lot of factors. So I think with UA, just generally testing as broadly as possible and then iterating on our successes is the way to go.
Yeah, we see that too. I think often clients come to us and they want us to tell them like, always make 15-second creatives. Those will always perform best. But we see the same trends that you see where it's a client by client basis and creative by creative, where we have to test different lengths.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's universal about performance creative is we find it's never the most thing that's going to have the most sheen or most impressive looking creative that is the best converting. So like within our team, we'll do a lot of really high production value stuff that can be used as like the primary trailer for a game, and our partners love it. It takes a lot more time, but then a lot of times this is not what actually performs. And when we show one of our partners like what's really worked on another game, or when they're competitors, or even an ad we've done for them that we're very confident is going to convert really well, a lot of times the response is like, oh, okay, if you guys say so, because it's not necessarily the most overwhelming of just like super high fidelity production. Because again, you have to think about, does it look like an ad? Does it look like a trailer for something? Or does it look like something that's going to catch their eye and be native to the experience they're having at that time? So it's really fun, the kind of work we do to get to kind of play with all of those things. But it's always interesting to see how the expectations of what you might love for your game are different from what's going to attract a net new user. And I'm curious if you see similar kind of trends on the retargeting side, Kate.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. I think one unit that we've created that kind of blends the best of both worlds is we have a rich media unit, which has like a video at the bottom and then some interactive elements at the top. And so instead of making a really heavy interactive element that could be laggy or, not performing super well, we put most of the content into the video itself. So getting a bunch of unique selling properties of the game into that video, and then we can combine it with the rich media. So that performs well. It is a good balance, but yeah, we definitely see those trends too. It's never the creatives that are the shiniest or most innovative concept aren't always the ones that perform the best.
Got it.
Makes a lot of sense. That's an interesting thing for us to try. I don't know if we try that, Ava, but maybe we should try it. All right. So one other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, it's in the same vein as the one we just talked about. And I think there's something that's very specific on the iOS side that I'm curious about. But I mean, Warren, Ava, to what extent do we think about, I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do we think about platform when we're creating our creative for user acquisition? And then we'll start there. And then I have questions for Kate about platform as well.
Ava, you want to start here? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think we test all creatives on both platforms, and I wouldn't say that there's a really big difference with UA with the creatives that do well by platform. We do see more differences in the store pages for sure, iOS to Google Play, but I would say not as much creative concepts. What tends to do well on iOS tends to do well on Android. I imagine like it's a lot hairier with the retargeting though, for sure with Scan. So.
And one quick thing I would add to that is Upptic has been expanding more into PC marketing, cross-platform performance marketing. I would say my assumptions have been a little off, which is like I was thinking that we'd see more distinct differences in what works on the small screen versus the big screen. But we're seeing a lot, essentially like what works on your small device is what's working on a PC screen on a larger device in general.
Interesting. Yeah, we're not seeing a major difference between iOS and Android in terms of how we design our creatives, mostly because the groups that we're going after are so niche. So if we're targeting users who have spent between $50 and $60 in-app, it doesn't matter so much if they're on Android or iOS, they're going to have pretty similar behaviors when we're going for that niche of a bucket.
Yeah, or maybe to put another way, the history of user behavior or the specific actions that you expect them to take is a much more powerful targeting lever and indicative of future success than whether they have an iPhone or an Android device, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, well said.
Yeah. Okay. I want to move on to some other questions sort of about the nuance of retargeting, but I'm curious if Ava or anyone else has thoughts about the creative aspect before we sort of make this transition to a few more sort of tactical questions about retargeting and the future trends. You know? I'm
good. This has been interesting.
Interesting. Cool. Well, so one of the things, I was talking about platform a little bit, and now this is something that's just as much for my own information as anyone else's. Obviously, iOS has been something difficult on the user acquisition side. We've had to really adapt a lot of our technologies and strategies in order to do targeting or to do modeling that drives most of our profitable user acquisition spend on iOS. How has Adikteev been able to adapt to iOS versus Android? And how are you seeing tactical, intelligent marketers, where are they using Adikteev retargeting as part of their marketing stack in order to drive their most success today?
Yeah. So when it comes to iOS, we don't have to rely on SK Ad Network. So our partners have been working with us to have a really clean, deterministic view for iOS. When it comes to iOS retargeting, we've taken the approach of we're only going to go after users who are sharing their device ID, and that we can, measure kind of the performance as before, users who have opted in. And so with that, we're seeing very similar performance to pre-ATT, and we're also able to measure in exactly the same way. So still run incrementality tests and all that good stuff. So in many ways, iOS is functioning as before, just on a smaller scale. So we have some clients who, have been more nervous about running iOS activity in a post ATT world. And I think with retargeting, that's really a missed opportunity where your competitors can get ahead of you if you just kind of block off the idea of moving forward with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting trend that I think we're seeing pretty comparably. I'm sure Warren can happily talk about this, but we see a huge amount of opportunity on iOS today and on the user acquisition side, and it seems sort of self-evident that you could see the same thing on retargeting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys, listeners have heard us talk about this a lot, but we are actually seeing like decreased cost of inventory on iOS this last year or two, which is like the first time in many of our careers that we've ever seen like costs actually going down. And so, yeah, it could be that some of that same trend carries over to retargeting. I don't know, Kate, is that accurate or?
Absolutely. Like we're seeing higher win rates, like decreased CPMs. Like there's definitely an opportunity there to come in and run campaigns. Again, like it'll be smaller scale, but the value is there. So it makes sense to go after your users.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, so looking forward, what are some emerging trends or technologies that will help shape the future? I think we can sort of split this into two components. Let's start. This is a focus on retargeting specifically. So let's talk first about retargeting technology or trends you're seeing there. Then we can talk a little about creative and sort of the overlap.
Yeah, for sure. So one that I'm really excited about on our side is the concept of churn prediction. So we've always used kind of a rule-based approach to defining audiences. So, like I talked about earlier, that kind of lapsed 7 days, lapsed 8 days, whatever that may be. For the kind of history of retargeting, a lot of advertisers have used those rule-based cohorts as a way to make sure they're not cannibalizing activity, right? That they're going after the right users. Targeting based on last open, I think, is a really good proxy for, are you targeting the right user? But what can perform better is doing some level of prediction, regardless of inactivity window. And so we've recently released a new churn prediction model that generates an audience based on expected likelihood to churn. And we can kind of score users into different buckets based on low, medium, high likelihood to churn. And it's been really interesting to start to see the results of that. So that's something I'm quite excited about.
That's super interesting. So just again, for my own knowledge, as much as anyone's, what are the data points that you're feeding into that? Are you taking like in-game events from the attribution provider and then feeding that, or what are some of the underlying mechanics of how that's actually working in the wild?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all based on those in-game events. So users opening, what levels they're getting to, all of that info that's coming in via the events in their MMP.
And then sort of one other question. You spoke at the top about how some of your core differentiation of your product versus some of the other retargeting competitive products is that you have this team who are experts in the field, really get a deep understanding of the games that are, of the games, and are therefore able to leverage your guys' team as an advantage for the businesses that you're working with. Are these models built custom for each of the games, or are you seeing overlaps in between different games you're working with, or are you building custom models for each of the games that you're doing this?
Yeah, so that scoring is all specific for each app that we're working with, which is really cool. And what we're also doing is doing kind of a pre-launch analysis before we even get started. So diving deep into each individual game, we have a set of analysis that we run for everyone, but the results are always different per game. So we do that kind of deep dive before campaigns even start, actually.
Makes a lot of sense. Cool. So that's the technology side. Let's take widen the aperture even further and talk about creative. We can go first to Kate if you have thoughts about creative on retargeting or in general, and then Ava and Warren as well.
I mean, it's an exciting time for emerging technology for sure. I'm super interested in AI, and that's something we've been looking at and experimenting with internally. Two things that we've been focused on lately. One is having tools that will allow us to build multiple variants of creatives really quickly. So that's been a limitation in the past is, we can't have a designer making 100 different versions of a creative, but we could sure have a robot do that pretty quickly. And so that's, I think, a really interesting one. And also a simple one that we've been using kind of the new technology for is translation work. So we have campaigns running globally. We see a small lift in running in native languages. And so AI can help us to develop those additional language creatives super quickly. So, I think there's a lot of talk of will the creative job be replaced? And I mean, to me, there's no way, but we can, use this tech to make designers more powerful and more efficient, which I think is really cool.
What about you, Ava? Is the creative job going away?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was, I'll date myself here to remember the point where people were concerned about like Photoshop taking away graphic designers' jobs and being really threatened by that. And, people putting massive watermarks on all of their really low res digital files to protect everything. So, I mean, we've come a long way since then. And I think it's just another tool in the toolkit. And I'm really happy for the work that it takes off our plate, like Kate said, with automation and just kind of allowing us to do a lot of production really quickly. So we're definitely internally leveraging a lot of tools on our team and testing them out. It's been really fun. Some have been way more successful than others. A lot of cringe factor out there with AI right now, especially with the animated avatars and automated VO. So our team's just really having a lot of fun with it. And our clients have been early adopters as well. And we've been leaning into the humor of it as well, too, and just kind of seeing some really good results there and having fun with it. So it's been a blast to explore.
I'm glad you called that out, Ava. That's definitely one of my favorite things, to see the team experimenting with the kind of uncanny valley of AI where you can so really tell it is, and making these like kind of intentionally off-putting ads. It's really fun to experiment with.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of really wild things out there, and not all of it is polished or beautiful or pretty, but it does grab people's attention. So we're finding it effective, and it'll be interesting to see how. Oh, sorry. It'll be interesting to see kind of how the style changes over the years, because we're so early on in it. So I'm kind of hopeful that we'll look back in like a couple of years and be like, oh, it was so early 2023 AI art, or, like so ChatGPT 3.5 or whatever it is. So I think we'll see a progression and a style changing along the way.
Yeah, another trend I wanted to call out that Ava and her team are focusing on that I think is really cool and fun to explore is the ways that marketing creative can add value beyond just sort of bringing someone into the app. It's not exactly retargeting, but we've been working, I think a lot of these ideas were born from some of our Web3 work, where these ecosystems are a lot more complex, and there's a lot more kind of hand-holding and like a breadcrumb trail of bringing someone into the community, teaching them how the ecosystem works, explaining more in the game, and using creative that's still developed from the mind of a marketer, but to bring your player or your community member on a journey where it's not just a handoff of an ad brought me in and then I never see anything, related to that again. Now I'm in this bubble of the game itself. So I'd say we're early in experimenting with the best ways that like you can tie the deeper in-game experiences and education from creative, but that's been a really fun area to experiment in.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Any other final trends from anyone? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kate. Really fun to have you here and have this conversation. Excited to we're doing more and more work on retargeting here at Upptic, and so really excited to work with you as you and your team as a partner going forward there. Like I said at the top, we have a really great offer for anyone who's interested in this, so definitely hit us up. There'll be a link in the notes. Kate, if someone wants to get a hold of you or learn more about Adikteev, where can they do that?
They can do that at kate@adikteev.com, ADIKTEEV, or check out our website.
Awesome. Warren, you want to take us out?
Yeah, Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. This was fun and long overdue to finally have you on the pod. So thank you for making some time available. And I learned a few things today for sure, because we definitely don't have the level of expertise and experience that your team does on the retargeting side. So glad to learn a few new tricks.
It was such a pleasure. I always learn something and have a good time when I'm talking to the Upptic crew, and today was no exception. So thank you guys.
Awesome. And Ava, thank you for joining as well, taking some time away from your team's very busy schedule, but always love to get your insights on the pod as well.
Yeah, Ava's like a staple now.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. So as always, the pod is brought to you by the folks here at Upptic. Here at Upptic, we do all things to help games grow. So this means all things around user acquisition, creative, marketing analytics, and we both provide the workforce, the experts to do this work, and some really awesome tools that let us do our jobs better. And in case you missed it, we recently unveiled the Upptic platform, which we're now licensing our software directly to teams to hopefully replicate some of the things that have really let us have huge wins on the games that we're working on. And so you can license and do that with your own team as well. You don't need to do it with us. Like, well, we'll make ourselves obsolete. We don't care. We'll spend our time playing video games instead. But yeah, there's a number of ways we can support your team. We just love meeting cool teams building games, and always happy to talk. So best way to reach us is through the website. It's upptic.com. That's upptic.com.